Yo, what's up, everybody? It's your boy Tate Dezay, host and founder of Brother Breathe. Now, listen, some of you all know that I'm currently in my PhD coursework, and I am taking a class this semester called Leadership Theory and Practice. One of the assignments require us to interview a leader within higher education that we admire. Well, y'all know your brother is an overachiever. So I ended up interviewing four leaders that I admire within higher education. And now I've created a leadership series for Brother Breathe. Now, some of you all may have listened to my first podcast this month questioning what is leadership really? Hmm. Well, buckle your seatbelts because now you get to hear from esteemed leaders from across the country that are going to share their leadership philosophies, their expertise, their journey to wellness, and the power of community. So I need you all to like, share, and subscribe. And be sure to follow these leaders. They are quite inspiring and they have a lot to offer everybody. Okay, so be sure to like and subscribe and share. I want you all to get as much as you can out of this series, and I'm so excited to be able to share these leaders who I admire and who are doing great work within higher education spaces. So again, like, share, and subscribe. Make sure your friends know about it. Don't forget to leave me a comment because I do read them, and I also want you all to leave a review because that is also helpful for the future work that we'll do together. All right. Remember, you're not alone, and we are going to breathe through this. All right. What's up, everybody? It's your boy Tate Dezay, host and founder of Brother Breathe. And I am so excited to bring to you all another episode in our leadership series. And I first want to thank you all for liking, subscribing, and sharing these episodes. I do hope that this leadership series is beneficial to you all. And I'm so privileged to be able to bring esteemed guests to your living rooms, to your vehicles, to your workouts, wherever you're listening to these podcasts. I am just so blessed to be able to bring these folks where you're able to listen and hear their expertise and their experiences. Today, we have an esteemed guest that is going to share his leadership experience, his wellness journey, and the power of community. But before we hop into it, I think it will be befitting to start off with the words of George Washington Carver, who once said, "Start where you are with what you have, make something of it, and never be satisfied." I think that that is quite befitting because the guest on today is never satisfied. He's always on the pathway of something great and finding ways to elevate. And so, with that said, I am super excited to introduce you to you all, Rev.Dr. Cecil Duffie, who is the Dean of Tuskegee University Chapel in Tuskegee, Alabama. How are you today? How's your heart and spirit? Did I do your name justice?
You did, my brother. And I'm
Okay.
so appreciative to be here. Tate, so grateful for your work and all that you've done to encourage Black men, especially with this idea of breathing and this idea of wellness and wholeness. It's platforms like this that give us, I think, the motivation as well as the push to do what it is I believe God has called us to do. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. Looking forward to our conversation this afternoon.
Absolutely. And I just want to say congratulations to your new appointment. You were previously at Wiley College in my home state of Texas. And so, very familiar with some of the work that you did in Wiley. And I think we have even some mutual friends, Dr. Dominique Robinson, and a few other folks. But how has it been so far? How's this transition been for you so far?
Well, I will tell you this, my brother. I have spent about the last 2.5 months here in Tuskegee, and there is nothing like the last 2.5 months that I've spent on a job like this.
Mm,
The intellectual capacity of our students, the warm welcome from our administration. We have a brand new president, Dr. Mark A. Brown, who has been in office for about a year, but was just installed about maybe 3 weeks ago. And his in hospitality, sort of his vision of making Tuskegee a place that solves the world's most complex problems is a
mhm.
vision that I have just grasped and have been able to relate to, as well as hopefully push through the chapel. And the faculty and staff, I mean, they have just given me not only the intellectual as well as the institutional knowledge, but this idea of really coming home. So I'm grateful to be there and looking forward to what I believe God has in store for our work there.
That's amazing. I had the privilege of bringing some students to Tuskegee back in 2000, I want to say 18. And I was working in California at the time, and we took about 18 students, all Black students who have never been to the South. They have, some of them never even been on an airplane, but they never been to the South, never been to Alabama. And we took them to Tuskegee as a part of our kind of Black History tour, if you will. And so we did the whole Selma, Birmingham, and we went to Tuskegee. When I say that they were such a hospitable group of folks, like
Mhm.
they just laid out the red carpet for these students. And I will never forget, the students walked away. While they had a great experience at the campus, I asked them during our debriefing what was the highlight for the day. And they all almost in unison said, the fried chicken and the sweet potatoes at the cab. And I was like, they were like, hands down, it was the best experience. And I must say that it was them sweet potatoes. I have yet to find any sweet potatoes that matches the level of excellence at that cafe.
You all must have come on a Wednesday because
We
our
did.
our
Yes.
our hallowed tradition on Wednesday at Tuskegee University is Fried Chicken Wednesday.
Yes. Yes.
FCW. So I'm glad you all came on a good day to receive the greatness that is our calf.
Absolutely. And even out of those 18 students, two of them ended up going to graduate school in Alabama. They were just so moved by that experience. And I'm just so appreciative of the work that that institution is doing, and really excited to see what your impact will be and your legacy will be at Tuskegee. But kind of transitioning a bit, you have accomplished a lot for a young age, and being able to be a leader now as you're impacting higher education. When you think about leaders who've inspired you, who
Mm.
comes to mind, and what's one lesson from them that you still carry with you today?
Yeah. So, I mean, my mentor from Howard University, the Rev.Dr. Bernard L. Richardson, who has served at Howard for over 30 years, immediately comes to mind.
Mm,
He is the individual who introduced me to college and university chaplaincy. He has walked me through this. And what I love most about Dean is Dean, even though he's been there again 3 decades, still relevant to this moment,
mm,
still innovative, still pulling the ideas from these bright-eyed and bushy-tailed first-year students and walking them through what does it mean to be a Howard University student. I think that it's his love of college university chaplaincy, and I'll probably say his love first of Howard,
mm.
that really gave me this idea of what does it mean to be with a student through the ideas of faith, service, and justice. And I look at not only his ability to be an administrator, but he is a pastor first. And I
Mm,
think of my calling into this work. I've always thought that I've been sort of bit by the pastoral bug, if you will. But I think most people have a traditional sense as to what a pastor does. It's a Sunday morning, it's a church, but you know he has shown me that you can be a pastor to a campus. You can be a pastor to a swath of folks, in the DMV. A million folks listen to the chapel, on the radio, and however many thousands watch each week on YouTube and Facebook. So seeing his ministry presented in a very effectual way has been an incredible model to witness. I think what he has modeled, most importantly, beyond being a pastor, beyond being an administrator, I think it's this idea of how can we involve every aspect of the university from the chapel's perspective. So he's
mm.
not looking for students who are religious, but he's looking for those students who have no religious affiliation at all. Looking for the nones, the students who say, "Listen, religion's not for me. I'm not a Christian. I'm not a Buddhist. I'm not a Muslim." But he's also trying to find the least, the left out, the folks who aren't really part of any particular demographic and engulfing them into what the presence of the chapel is. And that's something that I hope to take from him as I've gone, from Wiley now to Tuskegee. Beyond that, a dean is always on the pulse as it relates to social justice work. And I think when we consider where we are with historically Black colleges and universities, our responsibility has always been this push for a greater need for impact on our community. And Dean Richardson, I think, has done a marvelous job at saying, yes, we can come together on a Sunday morning, we can worship, we can, praise God together, we can be encouraged, but what does it mean to live out this faith Monday, through Saturday? How can we tenets that we have received, or the command or the call to action from the preacher, and actually, made it to our lives, made it work for our lives, beyond this moment. So I really appreciate his leadership and that model of ministry that has made an impact on what I plan to bring into Tuskegee and hopefully what I did at Wiley.
That's awesome. I appreciate that answer, and also appreciate this through line, because last week I had the opportunity and privilege of interviewing Dr. Jason Curry from
Yeah.
Fisk University, and he too referred to himself as the pastor of the campus for all students, right? Regardless of their faith, regardless of where their background is and where they're from, but that there's an incredible amount of a burden, if you will, that he mentioned that he carries. And then on what I'm hearing also from you is that you are, yes, you're called to be the dean, and you're called to this hierarchy, of course, within higher education, but there's also this spiritual calling, right? This spiritual burden that you all have kind of committed to through your calling, through your vocation, to serve students of all faiths and all capacities, because you have to meet them where they are, right? You're getting students from the ages of maybe as early as 17, maybe as older as, non-traditional students, as old as whatever, right? And so you have to be able to meet people where they are. So I really appreciate that pastor thread of like, at the end of the day, I'm the pastor for everybody, right? Do you find that to be energizing, or do you find that to really be draining in some sense? And how do you balance the two?
That's a very good question. So I will be honest, as we sort of talk about the highs and the lows of higher education in this conversation, I've been exhausted, but it has been a happy exhaustion. It has been a fulfilling exhaustion. I've come home, sometimes 11 o'clock, sometimes midnight from Tuskegee, but I have come home knowing I've given it my all and that students are impacted. I mean, we're talking about 300 students coming to a prayer night, in a world that lifts this idea that students aren't, tied to their faith, that they aren't somehow concerned ethically with what's going on in the world. I mean, there's such a hunger for a spiritual connection. We've come up with this idea of a tenet, curiosity, connection, and community. That's what we're trying to bring to the Tuskegee University Chapel. And hearing students talk about what it means to be in a community. These are the students who were in quarantine in high school. And so they're still learning how to have these interpersonal dynamics, how to have conversations with people, how to, tell your roommate that they need to be a little bit more clean, or, how to profess your faith in a world, that says that that's not really the appropriate thing to do. And so I leave every day knowing that I've put it all out on the field, but excited for what the next day will bring. And you've mentioned the name, Jason Curry. I mean, talk about a model of ministry. Talk about someone who's walked this road and done administrative work beyond just the chapel, but in, serving the president. And you have all of these folks, Lawrence Carter, who's getting ready to retire, almost 50 years of service to Morehouse College, Deborah Higgins at Hampton University, new folks like Nichelle Guidry at Spelman, or Herbert Brisbane at Dillard. Like, these folks are the individuals who I call the ones who are pushing the mission of the university. Yes, we have great college presidents. Yes, university administrators are doing the work. But when you talk about tying the mission or tying in how we effectively, do truth in service or live out the ideas of our whole school for Christ. Like these are the folks who are pushing what I believe is the mandate, from the very charter of these institutions.
Hmm. And I want to use my point of privilege because I have been able to read a little bit of your dissertation, and you are what, about 3 years post your dissertation?
Yes. So it was
Yeah.
2022. Yeah. So
Okay.
3 years.
So I'm interested. You named just some great folks within this segment, but I'm interested in knowing, like, since your dissertation and your research, how has your definition of leadership changed? Because I noticed that within your study you framed one of where you use like transformational leadership theory, right? And so I'm interested to know, like, what was your how much did your perspective around leadership change prior to you doing your research and now being post 3 years of your doctorate?
Excellent. So that's
Mhm.
I think a lot about what theories have come up, in research. And I think people think, oh, you're just, doing a study, you have some folks you're interviewing, but this idea of studying higher education or looking at models or theories that relate to your work, I think it's hard work. It is,
Mhm.
um, I think, something that is in fact transformational. And so I think I went in with this idea of servant leadership. How do I serve? How am I someone who's in the background? How do I sort of push um, my students forward, the university forward, faculty and staff forward, the board forward? But what I realized in my interviews, with folks who serve at PWIs, those who serve at HBCUs, it's that transformational leadership is this idea of how can we put the needs of the institution before our own. And I
Mm.
go back, to the example of the Black church, seeing, my mother, come home with the communion linens, and before she washes her own clothes,
Mm.
to wash the items for the church. I think about, her law practice and not charging the church a fee for her services. I think about, again, pastors and deacons, and I've seen this model and didn't have the language, sort of what it was or how it could be used, but how we have continued to put the needs of our institution before our own is exactly what transformational leadership, the folks Robbins and Judge, who in 2013 came up with this term. And so my hope is that as we move forward in the 21st century in higher education and even into the 22nd century, I know that leadership is about how we can come up with a strategic plan. I realize that it's about how we can meet the metrics, and we're doing our best to get on that U.S. News and World Report list and whatnot. But
Right.
over and
Mhm.
over, the folks who are successful are those who say, yeah, I have a vision, but the vision of the institution is more important. The needs
Mm.
of the institution are more important. I know I have some goals. I know I have to come up with, these catchy phrases to get people to do what I've got to get them to do. But the most important piece, I believe, is how can we push what the needs are for the students, the needs are for the faculty and staff, the needs are for the community.
Right.
And
Right.
I've been, most prudent for the study of higher education, especially in leadership.
Hmm. Thank you so much for that. Like, seriously, and also for your labor, because as someone, as a budding scholar like myself, I'm using some of your work and some of the work of Dr. Faison and other folks,
Mm,
because this research is especially this area of spiritual leaders and chaplaincy within higher education is under researched, and so I was deeply inspired by my own undergraduate chaplain when I first started my college career at Houston-Tillotson University in Austin, Texas.
mm.
While I'm not a graduate of Houston-Tillotson, that year and a half really had a major impact on my life. And so the retired now chaplain was my dear friend and mentor, and he's the one who really influenced me to go to seminary school. And I recognized, as like, as he retired last year, and I realized, like, wow, there still is a lot of like unspoken experiences, and that hasn't reached academia, that hasn't reached certain areas of research, that people need to know, like the impact of a Dr. Brewington, a Reverend Brewington, and others who are working in the vineyard of higher education, specifically at HBCUs, at historically Black colleges, universities, that kind of go unnoticed. And so when I say I appreciate your work, I deeply mean that, because it really shed light to a pathway for me to kind of carve my own way in this research area. But with that, and I know we talked a little bit about you working at Wiley, and just your experience also a little bit at Howard. I'm interested in knowing, wherever you would like to share. Can you share a specific moment where you felt your leadership had a powerful or positive impact, and what happened?
Yeah. So I think back at my time at Wiley, there was a situation on campus where students sort of felt unheard. They felt like they needed to speak up. And I will tell you that the example, again, that I understand college and university chaplain to be is straight from Howard. And Howard has a history, has an ethos, if you will, of protest. And the students at Wiley wanted to protest. And I think that giving them the space to state their demands, giving them the space to learn what does it mean to stand up for yourself. Um, and when I say space, I mean a sanctuary space, a space that the president or the board or other faculty and staff members couldn't enter. There was a space where these students said, "Hey, this is where we can come and strategize and not have to worry about the gaze, GAZE, figuring
Mhm.
out people looking, watching over us, trying to, okay, well, no, what are you doing here?" They just had the sanctuary space to do what it was they felt was important in that moment. And, that goes back to the Million Man March,
Mm.
which was conceived in the basement of the Andrew Rankin Memorial Chapel on the campus of Howard
Oh,
University.
wow. I didn't know that.
But it's also how we can empower this itch that is found in our students. I think about the protests at Howard University and how students would take over the A building, and it sounded interesting, but seeing their witness and connecting it from generation to generation, we're doing what our parents did, we're doing what our grandparents did, and it's not just a sort of a badge or a sticker to wear, but really the responsibility that students have, that really was powerful to see. So you asked this question of when I noticed that leadership, that particular position of giving students that space is not a popular one. You don't want to get in trouble. At the time I was reporting to the president of the university, you don't want to get in trouble with your president. You don't want to say, "Well, Mr. President, Madam President, I can't do this, can't do that." When can you ever tell your boss no?
Right.
But in those moments, of being at Howard and even being, at Wiley, there are times when I literally said, "I can't do so and so," at the protection of my students, at the protection of what I believe um, their confidentiality, would possibly expose. And so this particular,
Mm.
I think, a responsibility for a dean of the chapel, for a chaplain, for a director of religious and spiritual life is one where you have to be willing, as Dean Richardson would say, at times to stand on the wrong side of public opinion to be on the right side of history.
Mm.
Dean Richardson says all the time, to be on the right side of history, you have to be willing at times to be on the wrong side of public opinion. And I've stood on the wrong side of public opinion on many occasions.
Wow. And that takes courage. Because as you mentioned, no one wants to upset their president. And at the end of the day, you also don't want to bring any negative public publicity to the institution that you serve.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting tension to be in. And I don't envy you at all for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, um, which I would assume just kind of go hand in hand, but is there a moment where your leadership didn't go as planned? And what did you learn from that experience?
You know, I think about students who have felt unsupported. I think that there are times when we will, uh, again, follow the, let's say, the mandate of administration, or we will sort of acquiesce to what the status quo is. And there have been times when, you know, I've had to apologize to students, say I didn't stand up for you the way I should have, or I did
Mm,
not um, advocate like I could have, you know, in a room. And I always sort of go back to this spirit of authenticity and transparency. I believe that Dean Richardson allowed me to have as his graduate assistant before I even, you know, became an assistant dean in the office. And I try to have that same authentic, transparent conversation with students. Like, hey, this is what happened. This is where we are. And, you know, even if we didn't like the outcome, at least try to explain how we got to a particular moment. And I'll share this a bit further, you know, for your viewers who are in higher education, who are studying this work. I don't know if we give students enough credit. I don't know if we give them enough space to be, for lack of a better term, grown. You know,
mm,
like I know that we want to develop them. I know that we,
mhm.
you know, get them at 17 and they're still learning, but I believe that they have so much within them. And if we're a lot more honest, if we're a lot more transparent, if we're a lot more authentic in our own weaknesses and our own struggles, I think that helps us to relate to them. You know, 2 weeks ago, I shared with some students, well, it was a group of students, an issue I had, and I was, you know, very open, very transparent about something I did that I wasn't proud of, and like the gasp, the Dean, the chaplain, the reverend, yeah, I did,
Mm,
and their ability to say, "Wow," you know, and I came through it. I'm okay now, but I think students want to know that you're real. That
right.
the robe is nice, you know. You put a white one on first Sunday and a black one on, and you wear it unzipped to be fly and cool. But the students want to know who you are when the robe is off,
Mm,
and that robe is not just the robe of a Sunday morning, but the academic robe that many of us wear. You know, they want to
mhm,
see you beyond the professor. Be, be, who are you when no one's watching? And I think
right.
our ability to be that transparent with students makes a huge difference.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. And I'm also interested in knowing during those challenging times when you find it hard to be a leader,
Mm.
what spiritual disciplines or maybe even practices kind of help sustain you during those times?
Well, I got to tell you, I'm old school, so I
Okay.
believe in the power of prayer.
Yes.
I believe in the power of laying prostrate before the Lord. Before I started at Tuskegee University, I entered my office. I told my assistant, you know, I just need a few minutes, and I went and laid prostrate in the chapel. And that was the same practice I had when I was at Wiley University,
Mm,
face down on the floor. Why? Because I can't do this on my own strength. I don't have the the wherewithal, the ability, the strength, the power. And I realized that all of my help comes from the Lord. Um, Dean Richardson, you know, keep calling his name, but that's really the impact he's had on my life. He has a benediction that I use that says, it's a poem, it's a British poem. It says, I said to the one who stood at the gate, give me a light that I might go out into the darkness and out into the unknown. But the one who stood at the gate said to me, um, go out into the darkness, go out into the unknown, but put your hand in the hand of God,
Mm,
and God will be for you better than light and much safer than a known way. I think our perspective is we need the light. We want to be able to see where we're going. We need the guide to be able to know that we're on the right path. But the poem says that all that sounds great, but you have to put your hand in the hand of God,
mm,
and God will be better than light and much safer than a known way. So I've tried and haven't always done well, haven't always succeeded, but to put my hand in one who knows more than I do, who can provide a better way than I think I can.
mm. That's powerful. That really is powerful. Um, in this current course that I'm in about the leadership theory and
Mm,
practice, we talk a lot about leaders who have to navigate not only just challenging times, but actually crises, right? That could be happening either on your campus or nationwide or even globally. And, clearly we all have experienced that, whether it's from the pandemic, recently just, memorialized and remembered, right, October 7th. And just thinking about other maybe even incidents that may happen in your local community or state community that impacts your institution. So I'm interested in knowing if there's been a time that stands out to you where you had to lead a campus during a crisis, and what steps did you take and what did you learn from that experience?
Yeah, I'll have to mention, this most recent tragedy. We lost a student on campus,
Mm,
and to be transparent, it was through the completion of suicide,
mm,
and that was my second week here on campus.
wow. Wow.
Um, I think the most meaningful piece from that experience, and there were many, but you know, the president looks at me in a cabinet meeting and says, you know, we're going to take your lead on this. And this is an individual who's a general from the Air Force,
Mm,
someone who is old enough to be my father, been married to his wife as long as my mother has been married to my father. And to have someone to look you square in the face and say, this is your responsibility,
right.
I think was something. I call my mom. I was like, I can't believe that like this is sort of falling in my lap. And I go back to this nurture that is Pat Swaggart, President Emeritus, says that there's a nurture that takes place at historically black colleges and universities that's not expressed anywhere else in the world.
Mm,
I know what it's like to, you know, have a responsibility, but also to have the people around you who will ensure you have the tools you need to be successful.
mm,
And so while President Brown looked at me and said, this is a project that you have to lead, I think that the grief aspect was also supported with all of the various parts of campus. So getting with his professors and with the organizations he was a part of, and figuring out how to best um, come out of that particular situation. How do we concern ourselves not with just the moment of grief or the week of mourning, but beyond that.
yeah.
How have you checked in with folks who are still very much affected by the situation? So I think of leadership in the sense that it's your responsibility to lead, but that leadership is not a solo sport. It
Mm,
is one that can encompass and should encompass the people around you to make it happen.
hmm. Well, thank you for your leadership in that and just, honoring the life of that student. And I think that's a really good segue as I'm thinking about wellness in general around students, faculty, and staff. I'm interested in knowing what role do you believe higher education leaders should
Mhm.
play, right? As you just mentioned, leadership in this particular aspect is not just a solo sport, right? But this is a shared responsibility. And so, keeping that in mind, what role do you believe higher ed leaders should play in the overall cultural wellness?
Well, I'll tell you this. One of the things that has been successful in the work that we've done, even at Wiley and here now at Tuskegee, is the connection that we have to the Office of Counseling and Wellness Services. And
Mhm.
so, while I believe in the divine in the sense that God inspires messages, God also has given us a brain. And, to be able to go to counseling and to say to the counselors, what are students struggling with?
Mhm.
And letting that be a part of the sermonic message or the sermonic moment has been something that I think has been transformative, because students will come up to me after the sermon and say, how did you know I was going through that? Or how did you
Mm.
know that that's what it was I needed to hear? That's just what my counselor told me a few days ago. Yeah, your counselor didn't tell me your name, but your counselor sure shared some of the struggles that have been, pervasive on this campus.
Mhm.
And so when I think about the responsibility of higher education leaders, it's this idea of collaboration. It's that we are not operating in silos where, the work that we're doing is important to us, and that we only can be concerned with what it is that we are experiencing, but instead the work that we're doing impacts everyone. Um, I give so much respect to President Herman Felton, who was my president at Wiley. He
Yes.
instituted
Mhm.
something called the Sacred Pause, which was a
Mm.
week off. Coming back from COVID, we were in 2021. I'll never forget. And the president gave us a week off. He's like, you all need some strength for your own mental health. President Wayne Frederick and the subsequent president Ben Vinson giving those mental health days at Howard. Like, those
Yeah.
matter. And I
Yeah.
think that when faculty and staff, when students know that their administration cares or perceive that they care, I think that that goes a long way in the respect that you have for the university.
Mhm.
To answer your question specifically, I think it's the collaboration. It's the idea that we aren't, again, in this work alone, and we have to be in conversation as to how we can best support, what's going on our campus.
Absolutely. Wellness days matter. And I'm so glad that a lot of schools are catching on to like add those into the academic calendar. I'm in Morgan State, and this week was wellness week for us. And as we're leading up to homecoming. And so, I mean, I'm still stressed, but I am not as stressed as I could be. So
Yeah.
I'm grateful for these last 3 days of wellness, because I've been able to kind of, working full time as well, been able to kind of assess and organize and reframe some things. But it's such a blessing to have leaders and institutions that understand that you're not just coming to the institution with your brain, but you're
Mm,
coming with your whole self,
yeah.
right? So I need to be cared for, my mind, body, and soul. So, what gives you hope for the future of higher education and the next generation of leaders?
So I want to plug my students. When we came to Tuskegee, marvelous legacy that's been left by Gregory Gray, and comes from a very traditional background. And so, again, a very powerful preaching legacy, legacy of what does it mean to be a dean on campus. We didn't have social media, unfortunately. And
Mm.
so, first year students excited, want to do some work. And we gave them the responsibility of coming up with social media like Instagram, TikTok, like, it's yours. We gave you the credentials, make it happen.
Mm.
And within the first 2 months, our students have 1,000 followers on Instagram,
That's
and however
amazing.
many thousands of views on TikTok. I bring that up because what gives me hope is the ownership that this generation takes. Our students want to be guided, they want to
Mhm.
be led, they want direction, but our students also want the responsibility of ownership. They want to say, this is mine. They want to be able to look, touch, feel, and know that it was because of their work that something has happened. And so I think my my continued joy in this work is, yeah, I have a lot of goals. I came to my president with a 100-day, you know, plan, and I've conceived what a strategic plan might look like for the next few years here in the chapel. But if you don't have the buy-in from the students, if you don't have the buy-in from the folks who you interact with the most, I think your work is mute. So seeing their joy and seeing their excitement as well as their ownership brings me so much hope.
Wow, that's amazing. And you're right. They want to be guided, but they also they know what works, right?
Yeah.
Like they know what works in their generation, and they have their ear to the ground. They're in it. So we have to relinquish some trust and not be work hoarders and
Mm.
and hoard the right. They want this should be a shared leadership model, having them right. I mean, we are examples of that. You mentioned your dean numerous times throughout this conversation. I mentioned my former chaplain, right? They allowed us to be who we were, right, in the growing stages of our lives, and it has made a long lasting impact. And so I am so grateful for your wisdom, for your expertise. But when you take the reverend and the doctor off, and you just chilling at home, what does wellness and just relaxation look like for you as you take care of yourself? What does that look like when you're not the dean?
Brother, don't be surprised if you see me on a Carnival cruise, and I'm going to
Okay,
be.
well, be careful with them cruises now, because
Let me tell you,
they,
they're a
they be
blessing.
okay.
They're a blessing. uh, so I mean, I love the water. I love being
Okay.
able to go to the beach, go to again, cruises are cool for me because I just like the all inclusive nature of the experience.
Mhm.
But I will tell you was giving me a lot of um, stamina these past few weeks being here, newly installed at Tuskegee is like this 30-minute devotional time in the morning. I'm up a
Mm.
little bit earlier now. I don't live as close to campus as I did at Wiley, so it's a little bit of a drive. So I'm up, maybe 5:30. And it's like a wonderful time to say, okay, Lord, I need you to be the first person I speak to,
Right.
and the phone is there, man. The Instagram is there, and I
Mhm.
have a bad case of FOMO. So I
Mhm.
don't want to miss anything. But just knowing that I can set that clock, and whether it's meditation, whether it's journaling, whether it's laying prostrate on my knees, whatever the case might be, reading, it's just saying, Lord, I just want to dedicate these 30 minutes to our relationship. And that has been, a guiding force. So cruises and Jesus, those are the two things that
I
that
love cruises too. I haven't done a Carnival cruise. I'm just a
oh,
little scared of Carnival, but
I know.
I'm a Royal Caribbean guy. So
Listen, so I've done Royal Caribbean, I've done Norwegian, I've done Carnival. The thing
okay,
about Carnival, and I know people give it, it's stuff. But Carnival is the great equalizer. You'll find
okay,
folks who are, wealthy,
from
folks who are not
everywhere. Hmm.
wealthy. You find the kids, you find the old folks. And to me, I just love seeing people. And so I know it's not for everybody, but if you want to have a good time, if you love to do line dances, get on a Carnival cruise because it's going to be line dances.
Boots on the ground. Okay.
Exactly. It's just on the ground. And Tamia all day long. So,
Right, right. That's what's up. Cruises and Jesus. I think that
yeah.
that's amazing. And um, how can folks follow you or keep in contact with your work and any projects coming up that folks can be supportive of?
Excellent. So first, I'll push you to Tuskegee's chapel page because the students would be very upset if I didn't promote that. So at Tuskegee.chapel, feel free to follow their work there. My personal page is at Cecil Duffie. That's on Instagram, and Facebook's my name. But upcoming projects, we're looking forward to some guest speakers here in the chapel this semester, and of course next semester. So the mandate has also gone on about this book. So I
Mm,
hopefully will take my dissertation and apply it to add more voices to the literature as it relates
yes.
to college and university chaplaincy from the Black perspective, Black context. And then lastly, I'll share we're really proud of an organization called Sankofa. Sankofa is a national gathering of Black chaplains. So we're not
Mhm.
just talking about those who serve at historically Black colleges and universities, but again, those at PWI. So we formed our organization, have our IRS status and have elected officers. So I'm the president along with my sister at Howard, Kanika McGee Jones. And so we've been leading this work and looking forward to gathering those denominational ministers who might be in higher education, those deans, chaplains, and pushing this idea of looking back to move forward.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much. I'll be sure to link all of those resources in the episode notes in the description so people can engage further. But thank you again for your time, for your leadership, and for pouring into this conversation. As I mentioned before, this is in support of my doctoral journey, but also to support the Brother Breathe community. And so it is both academic and personal. So I do appreciate your time and your experience and your knowledge. And so, for those out there interested in learning more, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And check out the episode notes so that you can follow Reverend Dr. Duffie and his journey at Tuskegee University, and all of the other wonderful projects he has going on. So, remember, you are not alone, and that we are here to support, and you have a community of people praying and here to support you. Just breathe through it and know that you are, again, not alone. And so thank you again for tuning in. Until next time, be blessed. If you are seeing this video, that means that you made it to the end of the interview. And I am so happy that you made it. Now, listen, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe this video, this podcast to a friend, to a colleague, a family member that you think might benefit from this conversation. Also, email me. I would love to know what other types of series and conversations you would like to see happen on Brother Breathe platform. Don't forget to email me at mrbigheadproduction@gmail.com. All right. Please, again, leave a review. I read them all. I want to engage with you all. I love your feedback, and leave a comment, right? We want to hear what resonated with you in this conversation and what are you taking with you to your job or to your home or to your church or wherever you find yourself as a leader. All right. Remember, we are here together and we are breathing through this together as a community. All right. Peace out. Love y'all.